Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We welcome you here to the sixth race of the 52nd season of the RTG Talladega Challenge. I'm Seth Cole, alongside of Zach Fremont. And Zach, a little bit of an unusual off week for the drivers last week, obviously with NASCAR running their duels on Thursday night. So these drivers have had 2 weeks to kind of think about their positioning heading down this home stretch of the regular season. A lot of times, drivers with an off week, they're really anxious. They want to get going when the green flag drops. They're going to have to kind of pull back those horses here tonight, especially in the early stages.
I mean, I think it's a very real
Drivers,
possibility, Seth, but at the same
start
time, I
your
think it's a great opportunity
engines.
for some of the drivers that we see between 10th and 20th in points right now to really take a step back, take a breath, and try to recuperate and rebound from the rough beginning half of the season. Now, it's not a whole lot of secret. A lot of our front runners that we saw at the end of season 51 have struggled a lot through the first half of season number 52. So, as you mentioned, race number 6, there's only this race up until race number 9 of the regular season. Again, the season was cut short by one race due to the off week last week. So there will be 9 races in total for the season before we stage up for the playoffs. So, yep, Seth, I think there's a little bit of panic if you've got some work to do, but I also think great opportunity to, reassess where you're at and try to kind of reset. Having the week off last week might have broken a little bit of the momentum from guys that were running real good, but might have also broken a little bit of that bad luck that a lot of these guys have run across.
The drivers on the front row, they've already locked themselves into the upcoming playoffs. Bob Seminara getting his second pole position on the season, outdueling his teammate Joe DeSpirito for the inside of the front row. Donnie Garrett and Grant Wesley, they're going to make up row 2. Chuck McClure, who we saw go to victory lane for breaking a long winless streak a couple of weeks ago, he is going to be 5th alongside of David Cannon, who finished runner-up to him 2 weeks ago. Then it'll be Jeremy Jeffries and Bernie Mobbs in row 4. Mark Paglia and Bob Dixon going to complete the top 10. Rodney Sullins and Tim Knopfsker there in row 6. Billy Elliser and Josh Metallic, a couple of former winners in row 7. Ken Roberts and Jeff Crivello in row 8. Row 9, we'll find Richard Martin and Sonny Tallman, then Glenn Harris and John Godfrey going to complete the top 20. Jerm Lewis and Chris Elliott, they're 21st and 22nd. Row 12 with Wiley Coate and Chris Emery. We've got a new driver in the field here tonight in the 76. That is Trent Scher. He will start 25th alongside of Manny D, Robbie Nicis, and Bobby Farrell in row 14. Row 15 is where we'll find Dave Melson and Cy Jones, Andrew All, another new driver, and Hank Middleton, along with Jessica Shelton, Andrew Miller, Wayne Primno, and Dante Ricky will complete the field. 36 drivers scheduled to take the green flag here this evening at Talladega.
Another great, strong showing in car count tonight, Seth, something we've seen repeatedly week after week with this series. So the Dodge Challenger pace car has pulled off the racing surface. It's going to park at the exit of pit road. The green flag is out. Bob Seminara will lead the field to the line. Joe DeSpirito looks to have just a bit of a nose advantage with the help of Grant Wesley behind him, heading off into turn number 1.
Still side by side between those two rows. Now you see the inside edge ahead. We'll see if maybe Seminara can clear the 24 and move up to lead that middle line down the back straightaway. Indeed, he will, leaving Garrett and McClure on the bottom, along with Jeffries, to try and see if they can get that inside line going. Everybody, though, even towards mid-pack, migrating up to that middle line. Usually what we're seeing here. No 3 wides just yet, but you just got to get the feeling. These drivers got to get these jitters out, because it's been 2 weeks since they last took this Talladega track.
Absolutely. These guys just trying to get a good feel for the car. A little bit farther back around the 15th position, we do have our first 3 wide. Tim Knopfsker looking to the outside, but just ahead of him, Mark Paglia around the 10th position. He's going to look to the outside of Bernie Mobbs in the number 90 to make our farthest up in the field that we've seen a 3 wide so far tonight, Seth.
I think we're going to be seeing a lot of drivers in the next couple of weeks really have a sense of urgency to get to victory lane, because you were in drivers meeting here tonight listening to what these drivers are being told, and you already alluded to the fact that it's going to be a 9-race regular season, but unlike last year where only 10 drivers either won or pointed their way in, we've got a potentiality of having a pretty big playoff field depending on what happens in the next 4 weeks.
Absolutely, and that just kind of calls back to what we talked about before the race started tonight with guys. 712, Bob Seminara with a big side-to-side warp. It looks like DeSpirito will be able to maintain his rear bumper, but as I was saying, as we pointed out at the start of tonight's race, that really gives some of these guys the week off that we had last week a chance to kind of reassess where they're at, take a deep breath. And if you've had a rough start to the season so far, you know that as long as you can keep yourself between 11th and 20th in points, if you can secure yourself a victory and be in contention, you can put yourself right in the playoffs.
And we've heard as well that if you finish inside the top 10, even if you don't have a victory, you will be locked into the playoff grid. Drivers that, as you just said, are 11th through 20th to have a win, then they would make their way into the playoffs as well. As things currently stand coming into this race, it would look like, I believe, 11 drivers would currently be in the playoff stands. The only driver with a win so far outside of the top 10 is Billy Ellisler in 14th place.
Absolutely. So already we have an 11-car playoff grid. It's certainly going to be exciting. We saw how great it was last season. Back out on the track, this number 77 of Garrett is going to be looking on the low side of Bob Seminara heading off into turn 1. Get about 5 rows back, 6 rows back. You've still got the... Oh, we've got trouble. It looks like 3, 4, 5 cars involved in the middle of turns number 1 and 2. Maybe a slight bit of contact in the corner sent a car sliding up the track, and it looks like we've got at least 2 cars, one tumbling violently on the inside of the racing surface.
Manny D, Robbie Nices, Jessica Shelton. The flipping car was the 6 of Wiley Coate. Andrew Miller has been collected up. Dave Melson is involved, and there may be a couple of other drivers that got bits and pieces of that. Pretty violently wrecked through as about 4 or 5 cars went straight up the track into the outside wall in the middle of 1 and 2.
Absolutely. We see the 38 car of Melson working his way by. Looks to have pretty substantial left side damage. Wiley Coate taking the steering wheel off, put the window net down, climbing out of his car. He looks to be okay, but he is going to be done for the night for sure.
If we can take a look at how this started, it was a car that was in the middle of the field. And actually, it looks like we might actually be getting a restart here, Zach.
Yep, that is what it would appear to be happening. Not exactly sure. I believe we had logged at least 4 laps at that point. I'm sure we'll hear something officially here in just a moment, but that's going to give these guys a clean slate. Unfortunately, for whoever it was that started that wreck, I have a feeling they will probably have to start this next segment with an incident to their name. So that's going to put 1 strike against them, where they had to have another incident out on the racetrack. They would have to park it for tonight, but it looks like all competitors gridding back up. It looks like only maybe 1 car toward the back. But we do have everybody, so that's going to be a big break for everybody that was involved in that wreck, Seth. Unfortunately, like I said, for that one driver, they are going to have that 1 strike against them, but we're going to start it. We're going to regrid them, and we're going to start all over again.
And I just heard over admin that apparently, and I've been privy to having this happen as well. Unfortunately, when you are an admin of a league, they put the view replay and the restart race buttons one underneath the other, and apparently an admin was going to go and view the replay to see what had happened, accidentally clicked the restart button. So a little bit of a second life, if you will, for a number of those drivers that got a lot of damage from that first incident. They get a new chance here.
Absolutely. And man, I'll tell you what, looking down in the garage area, those crews, they rolled those backup cars off the haulers with fury, Seth, and they are all ready to go again. They're going to start it all over.
So we gave you the grid. Let's talk a little bit more about the playoff scenario here too, because we talked about, after the first 5 races, big names that are still down there outside of the top 10. And at that point, we were thinking, they had to point their way in. Now, with what we've learned, if they're able to go to victory lane, even if they can't get up inside the top 10, they still get playoff spots. I mean, I'm looking at guys like Bernie Mobbs. He's a guy that was a playoff contender last season. Jessica Shelton, who was in the Final 4 last year. Tim Nofsker, who was a 2-time winner last season. And even John Godfrey, who pulled off that victory in the season finale back in season 51. I mean, these are drivers that are down in that 11th through 20th position. And, obviously, if they don't end up having the best of luck in the next 4 weeks, as long as they can squeak out a win and stay above that 20th position in the standings, they will battle for the championship when we get to the postseason.
Absolutely. And there was at least 3 or 4 cars involved that were in those points positions between 11th and 20th position that you can bet your tail, Seth, right now are really happy that there was a little bit of slippery finger on the view replay button there. So it's extremely doable. We've seen drivers do it in the past where they've made up, large amounts of points over the span of just a couple races, a byproduct of having these large car counts, which we've had pretty consistently here. But if you can get that victory, you know that you're absolutely locking yourself in. So, if you've really been struggling, if you can just be in contention at the end of the race, you still got a shot at it.
All right, let's rack them up. Let's do it again. Bob Seminara and Joe DeSpirito going to lead us back down. You got to wonder if maybe they'll do something different from the previous start, or maybe the drivers in the second or third rows behind them might do something different. That time, DeSpirito got the nose ahead going into turn one on the top side.
Absolutely, and it looks like right now that bottom line with the slight advantage, it makes me curious if Seminara's got enough of a run, and yes, he does. He will slide right back up in front of the 24 of DeSpirito as we saw before. Again, they are going to control that middle line, but if you look just below them, Garrett in the 77, McClure in the 17, and the 8 of Jeremy Jeffries, with the exception of the 28 of Paglia now being on the extreme inside of the racetrack, Seth, it doesn't really look like we even had a stoppage to the race at all.
No, not at all. I mean, they picked right up where they left off prior to the race being restarted, and I think actually this is the soonest that we've seen of the two starts of drivers up inside of the top 10 going 3 wide. Tim Nofsker leading the charge up there, along with former winner this season, Josh Metallic. Obviously, for Metallic, Billy Elliser, Bob Seminara, Joe DeSpirito, and Chuck McClure, all winners in the first 5 races. They're just now looking to get those playoff points to rack up when we get to the reformatted playoff grid.
And we absolutely know the 088 of Nofsker is capable of winning races in this series. He has done so in the past. He also won one earlier this season before having the win stripped away from him after an incident was deemed to be on him on the final lap of one of the races. So we know when he's in good company, if he's got enough help around him, Tim Nofsker, a real threat for the victory.
How about that car up there, third in that outside line? We talked about 2 weeks ago kind of the renaissance of David Cannon finishing second in that race to Chuck McClure, so close to being able to maybe clinch himself a playoff spot. I mean, the limited number of runs that David Cannon has had this season, he's 26th in the points. If he can keep on the consistent runs he's had, just like last week, we could very easily see this 3 Sam's Club Dodge in the chase for the championship.
Oh, we absolutely could, and do not rule him out for competing for a victory as well. He would be able to potentially point his way in, assuming he can stay consistent over these last 3 races, but a very real contender as well. Right now up at the front, Grant Wesley has overtaken the 712 of Seminara from the bottom of the racetrack. Donnie Garrett touches the apron just a bit with McClure behind him. They're going to be 2 wide coming off of turn number 4 with Garrett on the button. They make contact.
It may be only 3 laps into a 66-lap event, but these drivers not afraid to use their race cars. Donnie Garrett, he door-banged Bob Seminara on the back straightaway, made contact there with Grant Wesley. These drivers trying to block the run to left and right, whatever way they can.
Absolutely, and it killed the bottom line's momentum just enough because it looked like Garrett was going to be able to, maybe make that pass heading into the tri-oval, but with that little bit of contact, it scrubbed just a couple miles an hour of speed off, and that middle line was able to maintain the momentum. As you see now, Grant Wesley, he has got just about 3/4 of his car ahead of Garrett now on that middle line. As we see that third row forming again, 4th row up, it looks like Tim Nofsker competing with Dave Cannon and Mark Paglia.
Now, obviously, we're going to be keeping track of drivers that win in these final 4 races of the regular season, but I think a lot of the stress of our focus as well will be around that 10th position in points. Right now, here tonight, the main focus will be on the 9 of Chris Elliott because he is in that coveted 10th position in points, but he's only got 1 point over a tie for 11th between Jerm Lewis and Hank Middleton, a couple of drivers that we saw nearly win races in the last 3 weeks.
All of those drivers capable of running up front and contending for victories, so it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out over these final 3 weeks of the regular season. But as you can see, up front, nobody giving anybody else any quarter whatsoever. The leaders, they're still quite tight side by side, not really making any progress in either line. And if you look back to Nofsker, who's up top in that 3 wide, they're in that same exact spot that they started at. It looks like maybe they will lose a position or 2 to Mobs now. Rodney Sullen's now on that inside line. So it looks like they've got 3 or 4 cars hooked up, but just not quite enough to what that middle line has.
Maybe one of the stranger things we've seen, because usually one line is completely dominant over the other, but to your point, all 3 lanes seem to have stalled out, and that could be attributed to the fact that 37 drivers drivers took the green to start this race, so they've got the numbers to even out the number of cars that are in each line. Therefore, no progress really being made by one line over the other. Now the inside line does get the advantage off of turn 2. I think Garrett was clear for a brief moment on Wesley, who now leads the middle line back alongside on the back straightaway.
But if you look at that middle line, it looks like the 38 of Sullins has lost touch just a little bit. The 90 of Mobs, he went to that inside. That's going to hurt the momentum of that middle line. They're going to shave probably 1 or 2 miles an hour off their top speed. And you see it's already advantageous for the 77 of Garrett, who's about a half car length out to the lead now as they bring it back to the line off the tri-oval.
Was double wide for the first 4 rows, now make it first 3 rows as Nofsker makes a little bit of progress on that top side. Now from row 4 on back, they are 3 wide for about 6-7 rows. Drivers in the middle trying to hold their line. Drivers on the top, I saw a couple of them swing really wide through 3 and 4. Kind of made me wonder if we would see some 4 wide formations, but for right now, they keep it 3 abreast as now Garrett and Wesley continue that back and forth. Wesley gets the advantage down the back straightaway through 3 and 4, but that inside line gets a big run through 1 and 2.
But I think what Garrett and Wesley need to be more concerned about now is the momentum that third line up top is making. The 088 of Nofsker now alongside the 24 of Despirito. He is now easily alongside him. He's going to be looking to gain that position from Bob Seminara next. Once he gets up to Bob Seminara's side, there's only 2 cars left out front, and that's going to be Garrett and Wesley.
Well, the incident that caused the restart at the beginning of this race was around mid-pack. You get the feeling that we may end up seeing 3 wide at the very lead of this race, and if someone makes a mistake with how close quarter racing is right now, you've got the entire field only separated by less than a second and a half. It could have very catastrophic results, and we're not even 10 laps in.
No, over the last few weeks, Seth, we've seen that happen. These incidents that kicked off at the front of the pack, and they take out a large majority of your contenders. But right now, everybody pretty much, for the most part, giving each other enough space side to side. Garrett has now secured the lead from Wesley. Garrett is now going to be out to about a 2-car length lead over that middle line. He's still got McClure tailing him, giving him a push off into turn number 1 in the 8 of Jeffries. It's not much of a surprise there, Seth. When you look at the 77 of Garrett, we know he's fast. Chuck McClure was finally able to get himself into victory lane, and we know Jeremy Jeffries is more than capable as well. Those guys just forming a really good bump draft, and they're making a lot of speed off down into turn number 3.
Yeah, you look at these top 3 drivers and interesting storylines when we started out this season. Donnie Garrett failed to make the playoffs last season. Chuck McClure made it, but he didn't make it via a win. He pointed his way in, and for Jeremy Jeffries, he had a victory last season, but wasn't high enough in the points for it to count towards a playoff position. And right behind them is Mark Paglia, and this has obviously not been the start to the season that he wanted. Obviously, as we know, he missed the first 2 races of the year, but then when he came back, he is yet to post a finish inside of the top 25. So if there's a driver that wants to get his mojo turned around down the home stretch of the regular season, look no further than the 28 Motorcraft Ford.
Yeah, Mark Paglia currently sitting 34th in the points standing, still 143 points off the lead. Now, we saw in the latter half of season number 51, Seth, Mark Paglia was in a little bit of danger of missing that playoff, and he was able to, consistently finish in the top 5 and the top 10, and that was able to make him up a lot of points. But if you're Mark Paglia, I think you really need to be looking at a victory at this point, because consistency being that many points out of the top 10 and top 20 even, that's got to be a real concern right now.
Now, on the flip side, a driver that's had a really good start to the season, second in the points, Grant Wesley. He has not had a finish outside of the top 12, but victory lane so far has eluded a driver that went to victory lane 3 times last season.
Absolutely, and Grant Wesley, he's spoken on that. It seems like when he can get good days and run quick, he can use it to his advantage, but there hasn't been many of those, as we've seen Grant Wesley through the latter half of the playoffs last season and the first few races this season. Just a lot of bad luck has kind of marred him in a position that's not really comfortable. We look at Donnie Garrett, he's 5th in points, doesn't have a win yet. Chris Emery sitting 6th in points, also doesn't have a win yet, before you get back to Jeremy Jeffries, who is tied with Chris Emery's in 6th. So we know, Seth, these drivers all very capable of getting victories. They want to maximize their point intake as much as possible through every race. But, you've also got to think about the guys behind them. They know that those guys sitting in front of them are in pretty good, secure spots. Their points are looking pretty good. Even if they were to have another misstep, they would probably still be pretty secure in that top 10. So you have to figure out ways. How do I beat them? How do we outpoint them? Because that's really what we need to be doing right now.
First 8 laps, maybe 9 laps of this race, we saw them 3 wide, several rows deep. We now look, and it's an entirely different looking field. Single file for the top 4, then double wide from the 5th position all the way back. And this could be one of 2 things. Either the fact that we are starting to possibly close in on their first round of green flag pit stops, but I almost wonder, too, if these drivers are like, all right, we've tested racing 3 wide, several rows deep. Our race rust apparently is not there from taking an off week. Let's settle in now and make sure we don't tear up our equipment.
Absolutely. But something really interesting that I would like to point out right now, Seth, is Donnie Garrett and Chuck McClure have that inside working probably better than we've seen it work all season long. Now, Bob Seminara is alongside Grant Wesley, who is running 5th right now. That's going to be your first double file, but we're not seeing that middle line work quite the way that we are accustomed to seeing.
Well, I think that maybe, just maybe, 2 weeks ago, something was figured out because Dave Cannon gave Chuck McClure a run for his money with Cannon on the inside line. I believe it was Bob Seminara had behind him on that final lap, and Seminara was literally shoving Dave Cannon around the track on that last lap. You see how the bumpers are lined up so close there from the 77 to the 17, the 17 to the 8. I think if you can get locked up like that and push the driver ahead of you, this inside line finally seems to have found a way to be able to counter the advantage that middle line has seemed to have the beginning of the season as well as pretty much the entirety of season 51.
Well, and if you think about the early 2010s with NASCAR, Seth, we saw it was very common practice at these super speedways for that tandem draft to be the way to make speed around the racetracks. Now, the front and rear bumpers on these cars, not quite as flush as what they were on those model cars, but what you can do as opposed to what they used to do in the tandem draft, 3. That seems to be about the key number. When you can have 3 cars hook up bumper to bumper to bumper, that seems to be how you make the most speed around the racetrack. Now, that can be said for both lines, both the inside and the middle line. However, it does play into account. You have to think about some drivers lift at different points. Some drivers get back on the gas at different points. And some drivers, when you lift off that gas just a little bit, is going to create a gap behind you, which makes it really hard for those cars in front to maintain that momentum. So you have to have a group of cars around you that you trust and you know that you can work with really well. And when you can put those things together, it's really hard to make passes.
I want to highlight a couple of drivers that I mentioned back in starting grid that are making their debuts here tonight in season 52. We'll drop back here first to the driver of the number 76. If we can find him here. I think I just lost him. But the 76 being driven by Jason Tincher. Tincher out of, believe, Maiden, North Carolina, and doing a very good job right now in his first start of the season. There he is. That ride looks very familiar to me. I saw Donnie Garrett drive that car at one point in another race. I almost wonder if maybe the two of them could be teammates together. And behind them, you got the number 14. That is going to be Andrew All out of Louisville, Kentucky. Both those drivers up here in the lead pack. And when it comes to a super speedway, we know this, Zach, that sometimes miracles can happen. So as long as they keep their noses clean, they may be sneaking out some top 10 finishes in their debuts here tonight.
Absolutely. And I wouldn't be surprised to find out that the 76 car is a team car to Donnie Garrett. We've heard him talk about it in numerous interviews when we've spoken with him about how difficult it has been for him to get those victories, because while he has cars that he works with really well out there, he doesn't have any teammates, and he believes that that plays to his disadvantage, which could very well be the case. So if he does have a team car out here, the more Trincher gets, a little bit more comfortable and he can make it to the end of these races, he could play a very contributing factor to that 77 of Garrett.
Think we got cars pitting here. I'm seeing the chat bar lighting up, and it's going to be our race leaders coming in.
The 88 of Wesley is facing the wrong way.
Oh, he's going to right the car up, but they're wrecking behind him. I think that might have been Hank Middleton who got spun along with Wiley Coates. Still no
yellow.
Caution.
no yellow. They are going to maintain clean and green, so that's going to spell out trouble for a number of cars coming in for the first round of green flag pit stop, Seth.
Wesley Wiley Coe and Hank Middleton amongst those drivers. You saw Robbie Nices has actually lost the lead group back in the 37th position, but so far, no caution coming out, and I think we can safely assume that more than likely we're going to see quite a number from this second group come down pit road this time.
Absolutely. We're going to watch and see what happens here. It looks like Novsker is going to lead that group off to pit road. No, I'm mistaken, Garrett, with that first pit position looking advantageous to him. So we look at this next group of cars coming into the pits. So far, I don't see anybody in too much trouble back here. Maybe
Close.
one bouncing
Dave
off
Melson,
the inside wall.
Almost for Dave Melson. He saved it, though.
Absolutely, but those guys will make it in clean and green. So it's going to be interesting to see, Seth, because we saw the 88 of Wesley get in trouble, but because of where he spun and his ability to recollect that car, which he did a very great job of, by the way, we didn't really mention that. I don't think he lost too much time, but it will be interesting to see if the lead pack does lose just a little bit of time to this second pack because of that.
And now we've got these four that stayed out: Jeff Crivello, Terry Bombard, as well as Jason Trincher and Ken Roberts. We'll probably see them down this time. Looks like Bobby Farrell, Rodney Sullins, Bob Dixon also stayed out. And Ken Roberts, he's going to get hit. Bobby Farrell comes back up the track. They're still wrecking at pit road entry. Andrew Miller is wrecking. Still no caution coming out yet.
No yellow. Now the yellow flag is out. It looked like maybe the 55 of Roberts with a little bit of delay refiring the car, being stalled out on the inside of the racetrack, probably bringing out that yellow. The 47 of Miller was out of harm's way at that point at the entrance of pit road, and the other car involved in that, which I believe was the 92 of Farrell, if I'm not mistaken, had also refired and gotten back going. So it looks like the 055 of Roberts going to bring out our first caution of the day here on lap number 20.
And looks like almost 20 laps in, we're going to get our first retiree out of the race. A driver that was involved in that stack up at pit road entry, Andrew Miller, has brought his car down pit road and to the garage area. Let's see if we can find out just exactly what happened as far as contact. I just barely saw in the camera angle the 55 of Ken Roberts going around, but then Bobby Farrell shot off to the right. So I think there was two bits of contact that took place in two different areas of that pack that was pitting.
Yeah, I think if you take a look at that 55 of Roberts, Seth, what you're going to see there is he checked up at a dramatic rate while the others behind him didn't quite anticipate him checking up as much as he did. And it looked like the 92 of Farrell just drove through his back bumper, and the car behind him was the 47 running into the back of him as well. So a lot of heavily damaged cars in that incident.
I gotta wonder, was the 92 of Farrell even planning to come to pit road that lap? He was on the inside line, as we'll see here through 3 and 4, because he was making a pass on the 710 of Manny D. So I almost wonder if there was some miscommunication there where he didn't realize that some drivers ahead of him were coming to pit road. I mean, it looks like he was migrating down there to that double yellow line to maybe come to pit road, but he was carrying an awful lot of speed. I'm not really certain he would have made it. I don't think the 92 was going to pit.
I could be wrong, Seth, because obviously I wasn't in any of those drivers' shoes. But if you take the replay back, if you can keep an eye on the telemetry of the 55 of Roberts coming off of turn number 4, he slows with the cars in front of him and then dramatically slows in the course of about a second or so down to 138 miles per hour, while both the cars in front of him and behind him maintained a consistent deceleration. So I'm kind of wondering if maybe there was a downshift that was inadvertent, if maybe a brake pedal locked up or something, but definitely a dramatic slowing of speed in comparison to the cars around him.
And you saw right there Wiley Coate and the 6 going around the outside of the 55. That is the reason the caution was thrown. If there had been no oncoming traffic, more than likely Ken Roberts would not have brought out the yellow, but because the 6 was in the vicinity, that is why the caution came out. And I guess the fortunate thing was that everybody that was on pit road there were the last of the drivers that had to pit, so everybody had pretty much completed their green flag pit stop. Nobody got trapped a lap down or anything like that with an untimely caution coming out.
Yeah, and what that's going to do, that's a huge break by the way, Seth, and we didn't mention this yet in lieu of this incident. That's a huge break for that first group that came into the pits and had a little bit of a misstep with a couple of them spinning out onto pit road and spinning out onto the grass. It's going to give those guys a chance to get caught back up. Now, we saw the aid of Jeremy Jeffries. He led that second group off of pit road, but because of the timing of that yellow flag, now Jeffries stuck kind of a little bit farther back in the field. So we'll have to see how this all shakes out. I don't think we're going to see anybody else coming into the pits again, with the exception of those of whom maybe could not have pitted when that yellow came out as they worked their way onto pit road a couple laps ago.
Chuck McClure, who was running second for the entirety of that second run, might have gotten hit with a black flag, because he actually right now is being scored on the tail end of the lead lap, and now coming down pit road in that 17 machine. Race leader is the 10 of Terry Bombard, so a possible costly mistake there for Chuck McClure. Obviously still a long ways to go in this race, and there's only two drivers that I believe will be off the lead lap. Himself and Robbie Nice will go back green, so plenty of opportunity to get the lucky dog, get back into this thing. But I think that win from 2 weeks ago, it gives him the opportunity here to not nearly beat himself up as much if he makes mistakes like that down this home stretch.
Absolutely. He's got that insurance policy that is that one victory that he's worked very hard the last couple seasons to, regain. But I don't really think there's any cause for concern. We've seen Chuck drive a lot. We know how fast and how consistent he is. And we know he'll be able to make up that time out on the racetrack. He'll be able to get that lucky dog. I doubt that'll be the last caution flag that we'll see today. And as long as he can keep the fenders on that car and not get involved in whatever incident may happen before that time comes, he'll be back in contention at the end of the race.
Terry Bombard is going to be out in front for what I believe is the first time this season overall in that number 10 machine. Terry has made a limited number of starts this year, 36th in the point standings as a result. But, I think that when it comes to Talladega, Daytona, or really any race, to be honest, whether you're running a full-time or a part-time schedule, you just want to go out there and win. Even if you don't make it into the playoffs, you still want to make a statement, kind of a la what we saw last season with Tim Knopfsker and Jeremy Jeffries, who ended up coming in around the midway point of the season. You just want to go out there and win. Doesn't matter if you are going to battle for the championship. There's nothing better than being the first one to the checkered flag.
Absolutely. And we've spoken to Bumby before, and he's been one of those guys that have told us if it weren't for bad luck in the series, he would have no luck. Now, Terry Bombard being one of the veterans at Rolling Thunder Gaming, he's been around for quite a while. So he's one of those guys that you can't quite count out, Seth, because although we haven't seen him up toward the front of the pack very consistently, a lot of that has just been being swept up in incidents toward the mid and back of the pack early in the race. So he's now got an opportunity. He's back up at the front of the field. If he can stay there and get a little help from his friends around him, I wouldn't be surprised to see him stay there for the rest of the night.
Absolutely, and I mentioned that a couple of cautions would put Chuck McClure and Robbie Nice back in the lead lap. Actually, this caution is going to put them back in the lead lap. RTG, of course, has two lucky dogs rather than one, so the 17 and 54, when the lights go out atop the pace car this time, they'll go around, get their laps back, and all 36 drivers that are still in the running will be back on the same lap as leader Terry Bombard. Give a rundown through the top 10 real quick. It's going to be Bob Dixon in second. Joe DeSpirito will be third. Jerm Lewis fourth, and Glenn Harris now fifth. Then it's Bob Seminara, Chris Elliott, Dante, Ricky, Richard Martin, and Wayne Pribnow, the top 10. And Dante Ricky, as well as Wayne Pribnow and Jessica Shelton. These are a few drivers that actually started towards the rear of the field. We know it's kind of a moniker there for Dante Ricky. Jessica Shelton was unable to lay down a qualifying lap, and Wayne Pribnow, we usually see him start outside the top 20. So, I'm seeing some of these names up here. Throw also Glenn Harris into the mix there in that 08, and even Chris Elliott, who was hot at the beginning of the season. It gets to this point of the year where you could very easily see some Cinderella stories down the home stretch.
Absolutely. And this is not the first time that we've seen that number 143 car up toward the front of the pack, nor is it the first time that we've seen that 616 car up toward the front of the racetrack. Both of those cars and drivers, as we know, Seth, very capable at these super speedways. They've got themselves in good position right now. We are about a third of the way through the race, so assuming that they can stay up there, that would put them in pretty good position come toward the rear of the race. So I would just like to point out, I did predict that, as long as Chuck McClure could keep his fenders on his car, that he would inevitably get the lucky dog. I just did not realize it was literally this restart that he would get that lucky dog, Seth. So we predicted the future inadvertently. We're
We did.
geniuses.
Absolutely. I think we're ready for our commentator's license. You know, it's interesting too, because if we go back to last season, at this point of the year, we had 2 multi-time winners. So far, we've gone a perfect 5 for 5 in different drivers going to victory lane. We'll have to see if it'll be 6 for 6 here tonight as the driver out of Wilmantic, Connecticut, Terry Bombard's going to be leading them down here for our first restart of the evening, just after everyone had been to pit road for their first round of green flag pit stops. So they were able to go about 19-20 laps before our first caution. Let's see if they can settle into another long green flag run here.
Absolutely. Pace car is in, green flag flying in the flag stand, and it looks like Bumby is going to get an excellent start there. He's about a car length ahead of the 24 of Despirito. I think that bit of a gap might be a bit detrimental as these leaders work their way off turn number 2 now, or I could be completely wrong because it doesn't look like the 616 machine of Jerem Lewis has gotten to the back end of that 143 as they come off the back straightaway. So there's going to be a lot more speed now as we see the 10, 24, and 08 move up to that middle line. No surprise there. Richard Martin now going to take over that on that inside lane with the help of the 222 of Chris Emery.
Very democratic top 10 here in terms of manufacturers. You got a Ford leading this race, a Chevrolet in second, Dodge is battling side by side for fourth, and Dante Ricci's Toyota has now cracked the top 10, currently running in the 9th position. So right now, all 4 manufacturers represented up here at the front, as we'll have to see if maybe the Chevy Bowtie Alliance here between Despirito and Glenn Harris, if they'll be able to maybe team up against the lone Mustang up front of Terry Bombard.
Well, and don't forget the 712 is not far behind them as well. The 712 of Seminara, we know once he gets back up there, he's going to be wanting to work with his teammate in the number 24. So it looks like Jerem Lewis kind of the odd man out right now. He keeps trying his hardest to get back into that middle line, but nobody wanting to give a whole lot of room right now. They know that that prime real estate is in the middle of the racetrack.
Well, remember when we talked a few weeks ago to Jerem Lewis, who almost pulled off his first Tally Challenge win, but finished in the podium position. He said that he and his teammate Chris Emery had actually found something down that inside line where they were able to pick up spots by their lonesome. Looked like he was trying that there on that restart. Now tucks behind Dixon in the 6th position, and you've got some teammates lined up there as well in the 4th and 5th position with Chris Elliott and Bob Dixon, the Cheetos and Doritos Alliance, and so you got to wonder if those two might work together against these top 3.
Absolutely, and we saw early in the season, Chris Elliott had a couple very good runs. At one point was the point leader, so we know he's a very capable driver. He's another one, as we've mentioned, of a whole other handful of drivers that's run into a lot of bad luck. And look at the 616 of Jerem Lewis. Remember, you were just talking about somehow he and Emery had found something on that bottom line. He is going to get past the 143 of Dixon, but I don't think Dixon or Seminara is going to let him back in at this point, but he's got help coming from behind him in a big way in the 222 form.
Third line starting to form again. Mark Paglia, Tim Nofsker, Josh Metallic, and Hank Middleton up there. Now Shelton's going to jump up to that third line. Look there at Donnie Garrett in the 77. Talk about those green flag pit stops really shuffling the field up. This is a driver that led the first 14 laps of this race, and now he finds himself back in the start of the Hornets' nest around the 10th position.
Yep, and now we see that 616 of Jerem Lewis on the inside. Dante Ricci moves up to that third line. He's going to get a big push from the 94 of Shelton. We know the 94 of Shelton and the 84 of Ricci, not strangers to running together, but at this point right now, it looks like that third line making just a little bit more time than anybody else in this gaggle of 3 wide. 77 of Garrett is stuck in the middle. He's got no help from in front of him or behind him. That's going to hurt him. He's going to lose a lot of positions as they come across the start-finish line.
And that outside line, as it continues to make forward momentum, it gains more friends. After Ricky jumped up there, now the Domino's Dodge of Richard Martin will migrate up there. He'll try and get the push alongside of Bob Dixon for the 5th position. Now Shelton moves low. She's going to go to the middle line with Seminara, kind of break up that third line, and now that third line's going to have to regroup. Paglia, Novsker, Metallic trying to desperately get up there to help the 43 and the 84 keep that forward progress going.
So we went from 3 lanes of racing back to 2. Jerem Lewis and the 222 of Emery. They are trying down to the inside of Shelton. They're going to put her in the middle. It's going to be Dante Ricky to her outside. But Lewis and Emery, they look to have that bottom line figured out. Once again, they're slowly but surely making their time. They're being patient about it. They've got cars lined up behind them, working with them as well. Right now, it's going to be about 6 cars at the front of the pack, single file, before you get to your first 3 wide with Emery. Lewis, the 43 of Martin, and the 84 of Dante Ricky.
We say it all the time, but what a difference a season makes in a league where you run Talladega week after week. Dante Ricky at this point last season had already been to victory lane, already knew he was going to have a playoff spot. He's still searching for his first win of the season, and he's still trying to jump into the top 20 in points. 25th in the standings. This is a driver who last season had bookend wins in the first and last regular season races of that year.
Okay, so Seth, something I want to point out right now, because I'm seeing it happen as we speak. The last couple cars that the 616 of Jerem Lewis has gotten underneath and gotten into that middle line, Dante Ricky at the same time has been on the outside of them. But with those cars in the middle line not having any drafting help behind them, we see how fast the 43 of Martin was. Now, he didn't lose pace off the back bumper of the 143 car. That's just the lack of draft. And there's a little bit of a suction that it would seem. I'm curious to see if the 712 of Seminara goes to the inside of the 143 right now, and he will with Ricky to the outside. I'm interested in seeing if the same thing happens to that 143 car.
And the interesting thing about it, too, if you look down the bottom, you got, 5 cars that are lined up on the inside line. Outside line only has 4 cars, and that's clearly the longer way around the racetrack. And to your point, Dante Ricky and Bob Seminara have kind of kept themselves side by side in those 2 lanes. So it's something I think these drivers are going to have to put back in their memory banks for later on in this race, that it doesn't really matter if you have a lot of drivers lined up in that 3rd line, because there's clean racetrack up there. It can actually make a lot of forward progress. So I think that 3rd lane, maybe even more so than it has the last couple of races at the beginning of this season, it may very well come into the play into maybe eventually determining our race winner here tonight.
Joe DeSpirito, he's going to move from that middle lane all the way down to the bottom in front of Terry Bombard. It looks like he has decided there is no real estate, no speed left in that middle at the moment. Now the 08 of Glenn Harris, he was leading that middle line. He's going to fall back to about the 8th, 9th, maybe 10th position, maybe more as they come across the start-finish line. We see that middle line, it's going away, Seth. But now, something that we haven't seen a whole lot of, we've got a bottom line and a top line with no middle line whatsoever.
You got to go all the way back to around the 11th position before you find that middle line. We got a car in the apron. That's Bernie Mobbs. They're going to let him back up 4 wide with Dave Cannon, Jeff Crivello, and Donnie Garrett. They all managed to make it through safely, but that was a heart stopper for about the second half of the field through 1 and 2.
Still 4 wide in the middle of the back straightaway. Set the 08 of it. Harris on the inside of the 43. Demar, they will. The 08 wisely backs out of it into turn 3. I thought we were going to have trouble big time as they were 4 wide heading off there.
Couple of near moments there in the second half of Talladega Super Speedway, but we managed to keep it clean and green up to this point. You know, you talk about Joe DeSpirito. Last season, he had entirely different priorities from this season. Last year, it was all about trying to find victory lane. He was consistent, dominating, leading the points. This season, he's already got that early win, but he's trying to run down his teammate Bob Seminara for the points lead, coming into this race minus 10 to the points leader in the 712.
Absolutely. Joe DeSpirito with a victory, as you mentioned, but he's doing something right now that I'm finding very interesting, and we haven't seen happen a whole lot. It looks like the 28 of Paglia, them with 3 cars on the inside with the 088 of Novsker and 39 of Metallic are going to bypass both DeSpirito and Ricky on that middle line, but now Chris Elliott working back up to the rear bumper of Dante Ricky. I wouldn't be surprised to see that middle line being led by Joe DeSpirito to be side by side as they head off back into turn 1 right now. But what I was about to say is I'm watching Joe DeSpirito right now, and he's doing something very interesting. He doesn't care who he has behind him. When he sees a line get a run, he moves up or down in front of it, and that was able to maintain the lead for him. He started on that middle line, he worked his way up top, picked up another car, moved back to the middle, and as Paglia and friends came, he worked his way back down in the front of the 10. Oh!
Whoa!
Big
Oh,
trouble.
no! Tim Novsker, Metallic's upside down. Dante Ricky, it's the huge one at Dega. That's pretty much from 3rd place on back.
big wreck. I saw the 39 upside down. I saw the 08 upside down. I believe the 088 went upside down as well. At least 3/4 of the field of your competitors caught up in this incident. Not sure what started it. I saw the 088 make a hard left and overcorrect and come back up in front of traffic, and all hell broke loose, Seth.
There's Novsker, the car that we first saw get out of shape, and one driver I saw amongst the pile of cars. There he is, the points leader, Bob Seminara, involved, another former winner in Josh Metallic, all torn up. Man, we made it halfway through this race, only had one caution, and it looked like pretty much everybody was still up in the lead draft of the 36 that continued on. This may be an early night for a number of drivers in the field now.
Absolutely. There's going to be a lot of cars damaged, and the cars that we saw caught up in that wreck, Seth, there weren't many light licks that would have done just a little bit of damage. It looked like they were all pretty hard, substantial licks. The field was up to speed when Novsker spun up across the entirety of the field. So a lot of hard impacts at the point of the, initial crash, but then all of those competitors behind them carrying 199 miles per hour down that back straightaway was with as abruptly as that 088 snap to the right. Nobody could stop in time. That track was completely blocked heading off into turn number 3.
Yeah, two things that led to that being as big a wreck as it was. Number one, obviously the incident starting up right there at the front of the field in a side-by-side battle for third. Number two, it was heading into a corner. I mean, sometimes you're lucky and are able to go down to the apron. Sometimes you can go up to the outside of the racetrack, but usually that's over in the center or exit of a corner when cars finally have the time to be able to slide down the progressive banking. When it heads into a corner, you have no idea which direction the cars ahead of you are going to be going.
Yeah, and I think, as we've spoken about in the past, Seth, I think what's going to be cause of this wreck, maybe a little bit of bumper grab. It looked like the 088 was tucked up as hard behind the 28 as he could be. His front bumper connected to the 28's back bumper, and behind him, Josh Metallic there was nowhere that he could go. And I think at that point, the 10 was in the back bumper of the 39 as well. So just that little bit of momentum loss with as tight as these cars are running, big trouble into turn number 3.
As I said, it seemed like the drivers on the inside figured out 2 weeks ago, if you push and shove each other, you can actually hold off that outside line. But as you just said, the bad part about that is it can lead to chain bumping, somebody's bumper not quite lined up, and lead to that type of bumper grab. And I think you hit the nail right on the head. That's exactly what we dealt with right there amongst those 3 drivers on that inside line. A lot of drivers with hard hits. It looks like at this point in time, only one driver has officially taken his car behind the wall. That is going to be the 08 of Glenn Harris. The 712 of Bob Seminara, he's actually still out there with the car smoking. He is going to have to bring that car down pit road at some point in time, or else they are going to be black flagging him for putting down debris on the racetrack. And I think what he's doing right now is possibly points racing. And what I mean by points racing is, remember, he's trying to preserve a points lead to get those bonus points at the end of the regular season for being the points leader. If he can stay out a couple of laps before either coming to pit road or getting DQ'd, he might be able to pick up a couple of positions and thusly pick up a couple of points.
Absolutely. If you think back to what Daniel Hemrick did Tyler Reddick, my mistake, did in the number 8 in the NASCAR Cup Series in the Daytona 500. Remember, he was one of those cars that was heavily involved in one of the big wrecks, but with so many other cars involved in those wrecks, his team just wanted him to stay out there and meet minimum speed because they knew if he could just make a few laps, he was going to bypass a good portion of the field that was going to have to retire from that race. So I think that's exactly what we're seeing the 712 do right now as well.
Waiting until these drivers actually cross the line, because I want to see who is running where, especially of the drivers that were caught up in that incident. It looks like if we go back to around where the 712 currently is running, he is going to cross the line in the 18th position. So by my calculations, with all the drivers that were caught up, we've got about half the field that very easily could be off the pace when we go back green flag racing, depending on how hard of licks they took in that wreck. And to your point, it didn't look like anybody took a light lick.
No, they all looked pretty bad. Now, Seth, if you remember what we were talking about when we talked about that inside line and that bump draft earlier in that race, if you remember, I made the comment, the magic number seems to be 3, because I think at that point you can run nose to tail consistently without having to lift too much and not having to worry too much about that bumper grab. But when you throw that 4th car into the equation, that seems to be when you see a lot of trouble on these super speedways. You get to about the 4th, 5th car back, and they don't know that there's that much momentum loss in those, 2 or 3 cars ahead of them. And that's just kind of what happens. But that is a byproduct of super speedway racing. That's not necessarily any driver doing anything wrong. That's just, everybody working as hard as they can to maintain that top speed and momentum to try to get that little bit of an advantage on that other line that they're racing against.
Robbie Nices stayed out to get a bonus point for a lap led. I think he'll probably be coming down pit road this time, which would then turn the race lead over to Gainesville, Georgia's Mark Paglia in the 28. Now, one thing that I was going to ask, prior to that big one striking, in the case of Mark Paglia, we already documented the fact that in the 3 starts he's made this season, he has failed to finish inside of the top 25. But if he can find victory lane here tonight with 3 races remaining, being as far down as he is in points, does he have a mathematical chance, do you think, through consistency to be able to point his way up there into the top 20? Is that an easy enough feat to be able to do?
I mean, that would take a lot. I mean, because if you think about it, that would take a win and a lot of really consistent finishes. I'm not saying that it's not doable, but I do think it might be just a little bit of a challenge. It's now, you look at like what we just saw. It's not out of the equation to think that there could be, in these last few races, some more incidents like that take out a lot of your top contenders. But you would have to be running at such a perfect and high level of competition at that point that I'm not saying it can't be done, but if you're going to do something like that, you have to do it right, and you got to make sure that you really pull it off, because you only get one shot at it.
712 of Bob Seminara was posted with a black flag. He has come down pit road to serve it, and that might very well be the end of his day. If indeed it is, he's going to finish down in the 35th position. And another thing we've touched on, the amount of drivers they have show up week after week here in the Tally Challenge. It doesn't matter how big of a points gap you have. The points that you can lose with a DNF in this field is astronomical. You can easily not only lose the points lead, but drop outside the top 5 because the points are just that close.
Absolutely. And we've seen over the last course of, the last half of last season and so far the opening half of this season, we've seen drivers take tremendous swings in points just due to bad luck. Now, if you remember, this is one that I always reference. Had it not been for Joe DeSpirito's bonus points that he had accumulated throughout the regular season of last season, with the size of the fields that we had last year, he probably wouldn't have made it into that Final Four and inevitably won that championship. But those bonus points, because he took a big loss in points over the last couple races of the playoffs, saved him and was able to keep him into contention.
Probably the biggest wreck we've had so far this season, maybe second fiddle to the incident back in January, that wreck off of turn 4 on the final lap, but certainly one of the biggest ones we've had so far this year, and we'll see the end result when we go back green. It's Mark Paglia and Joe DeSpirito leading us down. Jeremy Jeffries, Donnie Garrett, and Richard Martin going to complete the top 5 as Paglia going to get us back underway, and you got to think now, with Bob Seminara, who officially is out of this race and will finish in 35th. There were only 29 points separating the top 5 in the standings coming into this race. So guys like Joe DeSpirito, Grant Wesley, Chuck McClure, and Donnie Garrett, they've got to be licking their chops.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think there's any question. Unfortunately for Bob Seminara, he is going to lose the point lead tonight. However, as we have also mentioned before, he has one win on the season. So he doesn't have to, he doesn't have to be in the lead in points. Having those bonus points, it's great. But he's also got that security of already being in the playoffs. So he's going to cut his losses. Right now, Mark Paglia masterfully sliding up in front of that number 24 of DeSpirito and Seth. I think if there's any car that you want pushing you just as much as any other out there on the racetrack, it is that number 24 car for sure.
Absolutely. And you got to wonder here, too, with Joe DeSpirito. I mean, we see him and the 712 usually work together quite a bit. Now that he doesn't have his wingman Seminara to be able to help him, he's going to have to go to what you were talking about in that last run, kind of your friends are where you find them situation for the 24. And, we get an idea when we get into the first 2 or 3 laps of a run of how damaged and off the pace drivers are. It only took us to the back straightaway to see that Josh Metallic and Dante Ricky. Those cars are badly wounded, still running, but really off the pace. I think there was another car that may have faded back there as well, the 76 of Jason Trincher. So we're starting to see those drivers that took the biggest impacts of that big wreck over in turn 3.
Absolutely. And of course, Metallic and Ricky were two of the cars that were upside down and tumbling after all that took place. So not too surprised. It's unfortunate for them. Again, Josh Metallic also, he has the security of having a regular season win, locking himself into the playoffs. But if you're Dante Ricky right now, somebody that we saw win multiple times last season, your progress this season's got to be really heartbreaking because he's just had a lot of really, really bad luck week after week.
I love the mentality of these drivers, though, no fear, because after that big wreck, if I had seen that in front of me over in turn 3, I'd have been like, okay, let's all just run single file so we can make it to the end of this race. No, we're 3 wide, we're 4 wide. These guys, they don't care. We're going right back to what we were doing.
Absolutely. And the 28 of Paglia and Despirito, they are in trouble right now, but we have that middle line sharing happening again. Paglia and Garrett almost touch off the exit of turn number 4, but right now it is Donnie Garrett leading that third line up top. It looks like that middle line, they're fading. Only 5 cars in that line with an army of cars on both the inside and outside of them. But now that middle line up to the 4th position of Hank Middleton, going to move up in front of that 28 of Paglia.
Obviously, there are no physics for side drafting here in 2003, but I don't think I've seen a driver more comfortable with pinching, door banging here at Talladega as Donnie Garrett. That is at least the 4th or 5th time here tonight alone that I've seen him make contact with another driver trying to stall out that momentum. And with the way that the hip boxes are with these cars, you have to have tremendous confidence, not only in your race car, but your driving ability to know that you're going to be able to do that and not cause a wreck.
Absolutely. You have to be entirely secure with your car and have enough experience to know how it's going to react in close proximity to the other cars around you. Now it looks like Middleton, he's going to take a look on that inside line, but he's not going to have any help. It's going to be 5 car lengths before you get back to the next car on the inside line of Bernie Mobbs. But Middleton now right up side by side with Jessica Shelton. He was able to maintain that position for just a moment, but now the number 28 of Paglia, he's going to make that pass off of turn number 2 as well.
Well, Hank Middleton in that 2 machine finished 3rd here 2 weeks ago. He was the one that pushed Chuck McClure to that victory, and now he wants to finish a little bit better and get his first win of the season. A guy that comes into this race 11th in points, so he would fit into that criteria of drivers inside the top 20 in the standings with a win. He would clinch himself a playoff berth.
Absolutely. Hank Middleton, more than capable of winning on super speedways. He has competed in these super speedway series before with great success, finding his way back for season number 52, consistently running up toward the front when he's not caught up in other wrecks. And again, we saw he lost quite a bit of momentum on that inside line, but once that number 90 of Mobbs got up behind him, they were able to make up some time. But now the 616 of Jerem Lewis, he's going to slide down in front of him down the backstretch.
Going to be side by side for the 6th position. Actually make that 7th now as Mobbs will slide into P6. It's going to be McClure on the top, and he's getting a shove there from Dave Cann. How about this? 2 guys that were side by side to the start-finish line 2 weeks ago now trying to work together to make their way back up to the front again.
Absolutely. 2 very fast, competitive race cars doing a very good job right now, keeping themselves in contention for the victory toward the end of the race. Right now, we will complete lap number 45, so there will be 22 laps remaining. This time by at the line, we know that they are going to have to make another round of green flag pit stops. Right now, everything pretty relaxed. Everybody, the first 7 cars in line, single file, and then you get to your first 2 wide, which is going to be the 24 of Despirito, the 17 of McClure, and then a little bit of a gap back to the number 2 of Middleton, who is in that middle line behind Despirito. So right now, it looks like McClure is the one with the help on the outside, with help from Dave Cannon and the 711 of John Godfrey. So we'll have to see, can they make any progress, as it looks like they're now sneaking up to the right rear quarter panel of the 616 of Lewis off 4.
Yeah, we saw John Godfrey at the end of last season pick up the victory in the finale, and we looked at him as a possible driver to easily be able to make his way into the playoffs this season. Well, the first 5 races haven't exactly gone to plan. He's 19th in the point standings, but we know he's capable of winning, so we'll see if maybe here down the home stretch, if he can pick up his 2nd win in 2 seasons and maybe make the playoffs for the first time, as we're 3 wide back here. And this is because Jerem Lewis tried to make that move on the inside outside by his lonesome, and he's getting hung out to dry on the inside line. You don't hear that very often at a super speedway.
Absolutely, but I think what the issue is all the other cars are in the middle line and the top line, so there is literally nobody else except for Sonny Tallman right now that is running that inside line. He's going to lose 10 positions easily, a little bit of contact with a 92 of Farrell off of 4, but Jerm Lewis trying his best to get back up behind somebody. I just don't see that happening, though. He kind of put himself in a bad situation there. It was working for him early in the race, but once everybody got sorted back out in single file again, man, he's in a little bit of trouble right now, heading to the back.
Jeremy Jeffries continues to show the way, just led his 4th lap of the night. A couple of more drivers that look like they have fallen into the damaged and off-pace category. Chris Elliott, who's already a lap down, he's lost touch with the pack. Bob Dixon is now starting to lose the lead pack. It was like the 76 of Jason Trinchier, just barely in the draft of Manny D, trying to latch on to this lead group. And a couple of drivers that I noticed back there at the rear, they are still up to speed in terms of with the pack, but I gotta wonder if the damage they sustained is going to hinder them from being able to make a charge like they did earlier. Drivers that were in the top 5 when that wreck occurred, and that's the 88 and the 088, Grant Wesley and Tim Nofsker.
Yeah, those guys are trying as best as they can to hang on to that draft. Fortunately, they are not the last cars in those draft lines, but I have a feeling right now as they ride behind the 6 of Wiley Coat, they're probably struggling to just maintain speed. So to gain a little bit extra and give that push might be a bit of a struggle for now, but the 56 of Crivello, he's going to slide up in front of them, maybe give them a little bit more help, pull them down the back straightaway. But we are 48 laps in, Seth, so that's going to leave 19 more laps remaining. We know that we are coming up on a final round of green flag pit stops, and we know with 19 laps remaining now, the next round of pit stops, that'll be it. Nobody will have to pit again after that.
We've had 2 cautions here tonight. The second one was a big wreck over in turn 3. The first one was a result of those green flag pit stops. So we'll see if these drivers are going to be able to manage to get onto pit road safely this time. Jessica Shelton up there trying to go for second place on Richard Martin. No friends down there to help her though, but if you consider Jessica Shelton the 94, and I also noticed Wiley Coat back there in the 6, I mean, these are 2 drivers that could have had their races over back on lap 4 at the initial start of this
bumper
race.
Grab.
But then after we ended up having that restart, they got some new life, and the 2 of them, for the time being, making the most of it.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw that or not, Seth, but those 4 cars, again, that magic number 3 that I spoke of, the 4 cars were bump drafting down the back straightaway. The 28 of Paglia got hard into the back end of the 43 of Martin, shooting the 43 up the track. Now, had that been a 3-wide situation like it was earlier with the case of the 088 of Nosker, that could very well have been another big wreck, but there was enough room for those drivers to recover, maintain that, and you see they're back single file again. Right now, the 94 of Jessica Shelton stuck down on that inside line. I think she was expecting the 28 of Paglia to jump down to that bottom as well, because he peeked down there a couple times, so I think she was trying to anticipate that, just didn't kind of pan out the way that she was planning.
She'll drop back to around the 8th position. While they were single file at the front, they tried 4 wide not once but twice over there in turns 1 and 2, but they are able to settle that out. The biggest loser out of that one is going to be the 17 of Chuck McClure, who was a mainstay up inside of the top 3 in the first half of this race. All of a sudden, he's fading to the back, and we talked about this as well in the first couple of races this season. When you finally have that win in the bank, you know, that's a great feeling. You know you're in the playoffs, but then everybody looks at you and says, hey, you've already won this season. I'm not going to help you. I'm not going to help you get playoff points. I'm going to go out there try and get a win for myself.
Yeah, Seth, it's funny the way that it works, because it's I'm not going to help you, but would you please help me? That's usually the way that works right now. But I think we see the majority of the field, they are migrating down to the bottom of the racetrack, Seth, maybe indicative of green flag pit stops happening over here in maybe the next 2 or 3 laps.
Yeah, I mean, right now, these drivers would be in the window to make it the rest of the way, depending on if they pitted now or at any point after this. So you could be right. I noticed a couple of drivers actually migrated from the top to the bottom, even mid-pack. Dave Cannon jumped from the top down to the bottom. So you're right, those green flag pit stops, the final pit stops of the day, could be looming on the horizon.
Right now, it looks like the first 6 or 7 cars broken away at the front of the field on the bottom line before you get to the first side-by-side. Jessica Shelton working to the inside of the 616 of Jerem Lewis, but Lewis looks to have that position on the outside line. He looks to potentially slide in behind the 2 of Middleton, but not quite enough room there as the 94 of Shelton. Oh, trouble in turn 3.
Oh, did they save it? I think they did. Dave Cannon and Terry Bombard got together, but they managed to keep it straight. I don't know how that 10 didn't spin.
I thought that 10 car was completely sideways set. The fact that they all gathered that back up with no incident, very impressive. And you could bet there's a lot of cars behind those guys now that are just as happy that they were able to keep that from being another big wreck right at the middle of the field.
Can we check the pulses of drivers around that area? Because we not only had a near wreck there with the contact between Cannon and Bombard, but then we almost had a stack up behind that as a result of drivers trying to figure out if the 10 was going to wreck or not. So we avoided 2 incidents there through 3 and 4.
Yeah, and what that did, if you look a little farther toward the front of the pack, everybody single file with the exception of that 616 of Jerem Lewis. He's still trying to make something work to no avail. So like I said, Seth, I am anticipating at any point these leaders, and there goes one of the cars. It looks like the 2 of Middleton. He is going to make his way down on the pit road with the help of maybe 1 or 2 other cars behind him. One of those cars off into the grass right now. So yeah, I think we're ready for green flag pit stop, Seth.
Middleton, Cy Jones, Manny D, and Wiley Coate hitting pit lane this time. Leaders coming up on the wounded cars of Chris Elliott and Josh Metallic. So we have begun the second round of green flag pit stops. We'll see if this time we'll be able to complete them with the green flag remaining out. And I go back to Chuck McClure on the first round. He got hit with a speeding penalty. I mean, this could potentially be the money stop into whether you're going to be in contention for this win the closing stages or not.
Oh, absolutely. This is 100% the money stop as we have more drivers that are going to be peeling off this time by. This time across the line, there are going to be 12 laps to go. The 28 of Paglia, he will peel down off of the racing surface, followed by the 616 of Lewis and company. Right now, Jeremy Jeffries and friends still staying out on the track, still leading. It looks like the cars we still have in the lead pack, top 5, looking like the 8 of Jeffries, the 43 of Martin, 77 of Garrett, 90 of Bernie Mobbs has made his way back up toward the front again, and the 24 of Joe DeSpirito. I would expect to see all these cars in this next time around, Seth.
Chuck McClure, Tim Nofsker, Sonny Tallman amongst those that pitted this time around. Bob Dixon also in the 143. We've had some little packs here in these first 2 groups. I have a feeling we may have a big pack coming off turn 4 this time, because this is right around the point, the furthest that most of these drivers can make it.
Absolutely, and it looks like all leaders are peeling off on the track. You see them running multiple lines. It looks like the 88 of Wesley, he gets in there real hot, but avoids any contact with any of his competitors. That humongous group of cars, they made it in completely clean and green, Seth, with the number of cars that we saw in that pack. That's really impressive.
Again, going back to the no fear mentality for this drivers, I'm shocked Grant Wesley tried it again, because remember, he spun out trying to do that on the first round of pit stops. This time it worked, and it's turned the race lead now over to Chris Emery. Looks like we've got about 5 or 6 cars that still are yet to come to pit lane to complete this cycle.
Absolutely, and these guys just topping off the fuel tank, and they are off and running again. Jeffries will lead this group of cars off of pit lane, followed by the 43 of Martin and the 77 of Garrett. So these guys are going to merge up onto the track in the middle of turns number 1 and 2, and with as small as those first 2 groups were that pitted, these guys going to have a lot more cars to work with once they get back up in the draft. But Chuck McClure, man, he's got that 28 of Paglia all over his back bumper off of turn number 2.
Jeremy Jeffries got himself a good pit stop, maybe too good. It's about 7 car lengths back to the duo of Richard Martin and Donnie Garrett, then about another 5 car lengths back to Joe DeSpirito, who's got Bernie Mobbs with him. So these drivers are all going to accordion up very quickly. Some drivers are going to have bigger runs than others, and there you see it. Richard Martin's got the momentum. He can't tuck behind the 8. He's got to swing out, take this race lead away, because Garrett was not going to tuck in behind either. He was going to push the 43.
Absolutely, and they easily get by the 8 car of Jeffries. Now you look just behind them, the 17 of McClure, the 28 of Paglia. These cars easily going to have 3 or 4 miles an hour on the cars that they're coming up with. I think they're going to walk right by the 8 car of Jeffries as well. So if you're the 8 of Jeffries, you came in the lead, you came off in the lead, and now you're thinking to yourself, man, I'm just so good that everybody blew by me. What did I do wrong here?
Boy, McClure did not have a good pit stop the first time we had the green flag pit stop round, but boy, he had a heck of a pit stop this time. He was around the 25th position when those pit stops began. He's going to cycle around just outside the top 5 in 6th place.
Absolutely. As they come across the line this time by Seth, there will be 9 laps remaining. So I believe this lead pack, this is what we are going to have to work with toward the end of this race. The cars behind the 088 of Novsker, one of them being the 88 of Wesley, we know he is damaged. He is probably going to have trouble maintaining the draft on this lead pack, and it looks like he indeed is continuing to fall back. Looks like maybe the 38 of Dave Melson behind him as well. So it looks to be about 9 cars in the lead draft right now, Seth, with about 9 laps to go at this point. Richard Martin feeling pretty good, but that 77 of Garrett, we know how hungry he is as well.
Now, what's going to make this fun, too, if we do manage to run this to the checkered flag, there's only maybe 2 possible alliances that I can see based off what we've seen in the past this year of drivers that will be willing to work with each other. Joe DeSpirito in the 24 and Bernie Mobbs in the 90, that's a given. They work with each other all the time. And then we saw earlier on in this race when Donnie Garrett was out in front, he had Chuck McClure pushing him. So I think if those two can find each other, they'll go back to working with one another when we get down to the closing stages of this race. But then it's kind of a who's who in the rest of this top 9 as to what alliances we might see formed.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not going to lie to you, Seth, with now 8 laps remaining on the race, with only 8 cars, it looks like now in this lead draft. Typically, I wouldn't feel super comfortable as Richard Martin in the closing laps here being in the lead, but you've only got realistically right now 6 cars, and Paglia now falling off the rear end of the 17 of McClure as well, maybe trying to pick up that 088 of Novsker. That's not a whole lot of cars in front of him. So I think if you're Richard Martin right now, you're feeling pretty good about where you are on this race, because you've got the 77 of Garrett right behind you. You can see what everybody else behind him is doing as well. He may actually be sitting in that catbird seat here in the closing laps.
We'll have to wait and see. Richard Martin has been in this position before with a shot of winning a race, but hasn't been able to capitalize for over a season. Same can be said for Donnie Garrett. So you know that both of these drivers are hungry. Donnie Garrett, however, does come into this race inside of the top 10 in the point standings. So I know every driver wants to win, but in the case here, I mean, Richard Martin really has to get a win to put himself in playoff competition. Donnie Garrett at this point in time could point his way in.
Absolutely. And we know Martin, he is capable of winning on these super speedways. He's done it in the past. If you look back to the 6th place running McClure car, he keeps trying to make a look to the outside of Jeffries, maybe trying to gauge whether Jeffries wants to make that six more laps. Guys being a little bit more patient. You see the 24 of DeSpirito. He's going to look low of the Garrett in the machine in the middle of the back straightaway, but he's going to fade back up into the pack. Still completely single file in that middle line, 10 cars deep.
And Chuck McClure knows at any super speedway, if you're going to generate a run, it has to happen at the back of the lead group. McClure steps out and Jeffrey steps out. That's going to give an opportunity for guys up there inside the top 4 to be able to then pick them up and pull them up and be able to form either an inside or an outside line, depending on where they want to make the move. But for McClure, he realizes he has to be the one to make that step out, and if somebody goes with him, that's where the run's going to generate.
Absolutely. And with 5 laps remaining, if I'm Richard Martin right now, not only am I feeling pretty comfortable watching my mirror, knowing that everybody else is just single file, but just ahead of them, they have 3 cars that are drafting ahead of them. By the end of the race, they will come into play as well. Chuck McClure now looking to the outside of the Jeffries number 8 machine, but they're just 3 kind of 4 cars if you count the Jerem Lewis machine on that outside line. Right now, you still got 5 cars on that middle line, but McClure making just a little bit of time. He's on the outside of that 8 and working to the right rear quarter panel of the number 90 of Mobbs.
I looked there at that second group being led by Billy Elliser, and they are losing about half a second to 6/10 to this lead group. So right now, these may be the ones to settle it out, and they're catching traffic up ahead there too. I saw about 3 cars scattered up in front of them, the 76, the 94, and I believe that might be the 14 as well. Or no, sorry, that's the 41. Looks like they're all going to move up out of the way, but I mean, they're 3 wide here with the lead group.
Absolutely, and the 90 of Mobbs almost makes contact with the 8 of Jeffries. The 90 of Mobbs now looking to the inside of his teammate. These first 9 leaders, they're kind of scattered all over the place, and It looks like everybody wants to make a move, and there goes the Garrett machine. Garrett gonna make contact with the 43 of Martin. Martin slides up the racetrack in front of lap traffic.
Both cars were absolutely sideways with that contact through the trioval, the lightest place on the track. Somehow they both kept it straight, but Martin the biggest loser as Garrett now goes to the point, but then he looks back in his rearview mirror. Joe DeSpirito's got his bunny Birdie Mobs in tow.
And don't look now, but you've also got the number 8 of Jeremy Jeffries with a huge run down the back straightaway. A little bit of contact there. It looks like Jeffries going to squeeze the 90 of Mobs out of line. McClure now looking high on the 8 of Jeffries.
Push is coming to shove, both figuratively and literally, as it will be 2 to go this next time around. And these drivers know they're racing to the next flag, whether it be the caution or the checkered flag. Now McClure left out to dry on the top side, as Garrett's going to be looking on this final 5 miles in his rearview mirror, then out the windshield.
2 more laps to go. The number 24 of DeSpirito's back or front bumper planted firmly in the back bumper of the 77 of Garrett at this time. It doesn't look like DeSpirito looking to make that move immediately, but I anticipate it coming soon because I think Jeffries in the 8 machine is going to give him a big shot. And we've heard Garrett talk about it before. I need teammates. Right now, nobody has a teammate with the exception of the 24 of DeSpirito, and that's 2 cars back in the form of 90 of Mobs.
Donnie Garrett, as we mentioned, failed to make the playoffs last season. If he wins tonight, he is ensured to be battling for the championship here in season 52. He's going to have 2.66 miles left to defend against the 24 of the defending champion, Joe DeSpirito. Does a run generate from Jeffries on back? We'll wait and see.
I don't know, but there was a little bit of a gap between the 77 and the 24, and it looks like the 24 may be hanging it back just a little bit on this final lap. McClure making a run to the outside of Mobs off of turn number 2. Jeffries, he's going to move up in front of McClure. It looks like DeSpirito making the run to the middle line. Donnie Garrett all by himself at the end of the back straightaway.
Jeffries has the help. Now McClure jumps up even higher. Caution's going to come out. We're going to race back to the checkers after Paglia and Martin wreck. Jeremy Jeffries going to have a bit of a gap here. He's going to maybe have a run on him, courtesy of the 77 of Donnie Garrett through the trioval.
They're not done yet. Seth Jeffries with the lead in the middle of the trioval. Can Garrett maintain a run? No. The 77 is not going to be able to get that run. Jeffries from the middle of the pack gonna make the win. It looks like Jeffries, his first season, our 6th different winner in race number 6 of season number 52.
Back on October of 2020, Jeremy Jeffries went to victory lane in what was race 7 of season 51, but he was so far down in the point stands it didn't count towards a playoff position. That changes this season as Jeffries came into this race tied for 6th in points. He has just now clinched himself a championship berth in the playoffs.
Man, but what heartbreak for the number 77 of Donnie Garrett. He could taste that victory. He had it taken away from him on the back straightaway. Then everybody wrecked and he could taste it again, but he just couldn't close up on the 8 car. Garrett brings it home in that 2nd position. Garrett still in good contention in the points, so he doesn't have too much to worry about. But Jeremy Jeffries, who came into this race tied for 6th in points with the numbers 222 of Chris Emery, he is now guaranteed into the playoff grid at the end of the season.
Boy, with not knowing what was going to happen on that final lap, I quickly checked to see the last time that Donnie Garrett had been to victory lane. If he had won, he would have snapped a winless streak going all the way back to season 48 in October of 2019. But Jeremy Jeffries snipes the win away in the final half of the final lap, as he's going to get to burn it down for the first time this season. And now Jeremy Jeffries throws his name into the ring of drivers that are going to try to see if they can win this championship, as a little bit of a premature end to the burnout there for the driver of the 8 machine. No, it's still under power. He's still going.
He's still going. Bit of a collision, not quite sure what that was about, but Jeffries is going to, he's going to celebrate that victory. What once was a completely immaculate and clean race car, rear end now destroyed on that. But look at who finished in that number 3 position, Seth, a driver that we had just about written off, Tim Nofsker in that 088 machine.
It looked like someone had taken that top 9 on the final lap, thrown them up into the air and completely reshuffled up the finishing results of what they looked like crossing the start finish line. Because Garrett was the leader. He finishes second. Nofsker was back around the fifth, sixth position. He gets that third spot. Jerm Lewis, I believe, was the last car in that pack of 9. He's going to finish in the top 10, his second top 5 finish of the season in fourth. And Chuck McClure, 2 weeks after picking up that victory, follows it up with a top 5 run of fifth.
Yeah, man, a lot of those guys, didn't expect to see that contact there on that last lap, but those drivers that were involved in that look to have brought it home. They look to have been none the worse for the wear. They didn't win the race. However, if you look, they still had pretty solid finishes. So the 24 of Despirito, we did see he spun up the track into the wall, collected a couple cars. He still maintained a 7th place finishing position there. So, really cool to see. Heartbreak for Donnie Garrett. And at the same time, Tim Nofsker, who was caught up in that major melee in the first 1/3 point of the race earlier tonight, he's got to be feeling pretty good coming home in 3rd position.
2 drivers that really lost out on positions with that wreck over in turn 3 were Richard Martin and Mark Paglia. They'll finish in 21st and 22nd, but still on the lead lap. And only 3 cautions here tonight. Yes, we did have that really big wreck that kind of shuffled up who was still a contender and who wasn't back in the first half of this race. But you see, we had a number of drivers from 26th on down finish off the lead lap, and then Dante Ricky in 34th. Bob Seminara will lose the points lead as he finished 35th. Glenn Harris and Andrew Miller also finishing out of this race. But I'll tell you what, we've ended up having now 6 races here in season 52. And as we would fully expect, no 2 Talladega races have been alike.
No 2 Talladega races have been alike, Seth, and we still have not had a repeat winner yet this season. So there's going to be races 7, 8, and 9 remaining before the playoffs. So still 3 more opportunities to get unique winners this season. But, 6 weeks in, that statistic alone is pretty impressive because you see guys consistently get on good runs, get a lot of momentum at Talladega, and just chain those together. Last season, we saw multiple drivers within the first half of the regular season pull off repeat victories. Not the case so far in season number 52, but it's certainly kept it interesting. And again, we're going to have another shakeup in the points once all is said and done here tonight.
And speaking of points, obviously, still with 3 races to go, it's still too early to say. But when we start getting closer down to the end of the regular season, we're going to start to get an idea of drivers that are already going to lock themselves into the playoffs on points. And 3 drivers that stand out to me here tonight that finished up beside the top 10. Grant Wesley, his wounded race car, still finished in 9th. He was 2nd in points. Donnie Garrett, 5th in points, finishing runner-up. And Chris Emery, who came into this race tied for 6th in the standings, finishing in the 8th position. I mean, these are drivers knowing that drivers outside the top 10 that have a win would be added to the playoff grid rather than replacing a driver in the playoff grid. It gives them quite a bit of cushion space, I would think, going into the final 3 races.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that number 88 of Grant Wesley, being able to salvage a good run here tonight with his finishing in that 9th position. He is going to take over the points lead. Now, again, the standings are unofficial because the race is unofficial until, pending review. But right now, the top 5 in points as they stand: Grant Wesley, Joe Despirito, 6 back of him, Jeremy Jeffries, 16 points out of the point lead, Chuck McClure tied for 3rd with Jeremy Jeffries, also 16 points, and Donnie Garrett, he is now 5th in points. So what was a good day for some people, a bad day for others. And we've seen, just like we said, the Bob Seminara machine, who, lost a lot of point position with that finish in that wreck tonight. He went from the point lead all the way down to that 6th place spot in points. So he's got a little bit of work to do, but, not too much of a concern as he's got that guaranteed playoff spot with the courtesy of that win so far this season.
And obviously, with Josh Metallic winning the season opener, he knows he's going to battle for the playoffs. He dropped 6 spots in the standings. Why that's important, though, is drivers that gain spots in the standings moving up closer inside and just outside the top 10, like Jerm Lewis, Hank Middleton, Bernie Mobbs, and Tim Nofsker. If these guys don't win in these final 3 races, it's going to be a heck of a battle for those final spots inside of the top 10 points-wise.
Absolutely. So a lot of guys, that's opportunity for them. Just like we spoke on earlier, if you can remain consistent and just keep trying to point one here, get another point there, kind of like we saw Bob Seminara attempt to do. Unfortunately, it just didn't work out for him as he was one of the more badly damaged cars out on the racetrack. Hank Middleton, he's looking at the points right now and he's going, hey man, Bernie and I are tied for 10th in points. We don't have a win yet, but we don't need it. So as long as they can keep that consistency up, man, they'll be in playoff contention at the end of the season.
Absolutely. Not quite the finishes that drivers Jason Trincher and Andrew All were looking for in their debuts, but they did finish out the race one lap down in 28th and 29th, respectively. So good job for them here this evening. As now we're going to talk with some of our top three finishers. One of the drivers we just talked about that gained spots and is right up there hovering around that 10th position in the point stands is tonight's third place finisher, the driver of the 088, Tim Nofsker. Hey, Tim, it's Zach and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
Yes, sir. I've got you both.
Well, we certainly saw that final round of green flag pit stops pretty much determine who was going to be in the running for this victory, but you guys were there, a pack of 9, all running single file leading up to the end of this race. Plus, you had some traffic that came into play. How difficult was it to be able to plan when you were going to make a move and try and make a run?
Well, to be honest with you guys, I was along for the ride. I got enough damage in that first incident to it was fast enough in the draft, but I would have never been able to lead. So even with that 9-car draft, I was, sometimes getting pulled off of it.
Yeah, let's talk about that incident you were involved in. You were right there at the start of it over into turn 3, that big wreck. I mean, we've seen a couple of big wrecks this season, but this one looked like the huge one. Were you just along for the ride there? What happened from your perspective, or did it happen just behind you? You didn't really see how it started.
No, I was right in the middle of it, unfortunately. I just caught a bad bump, I think. Everybody was pushing to keep that low line even with the middle line. And, just a little bit of a bad bump, kind of an accordion bump.
Hey, Tim, good job on that third place finish tonight at Zach in the booth. Hey, man, I want to ask you now, we've seen, over the last 2 races, it looked like for the first, about 4.5 races of the season, that middle line was really the place to be. It made the most speed. Nobody was really able to compete with it unless you had that middle line sharing that we've talked about going on. But the last 2 races now, it seems like some guys have really figured out that bottom line. Can you speak on that a little bit to us?
Yeah, and as always, some guys are more aggressive pushers than other people. So, we were making good time early on the high side. I mean, it just really depends who you're hooked up with, who's the pusher, who's the leader. I mean, there's a skill to running each line, but yeah, it really just depends on who's there and how aggressive they're willing to be.
I gotcha. So right now, as it stands, now we know that there was that incident earlier in the season where you stripped of that victory, but ever since then, you've been slowly and methodically working your way back up to the points. So right now, as unofficially as the race stands right now, you are 12th in points, 6 points out of the top 10, which is currently a tie between Hank Middleton and Bernie Mobbs. Now, what's your plan? Do you want to get up there, get a win so you know that you're in, or do you feel pretty comfortable in the fact that you think that you can be consistent enough to get yourself back into that top 10 in points before the playoffs start?
Yeah, obviously I'd love to win, but my goal is just to secure a spot in that top 10 and then try to protect it. I mean, all these guys, especially in that, 7th to 12th, 13th, 14th, I mean, the points are so tight that it might become more of an issue of protecting what you have versus being aggressive. The goal is, after last season, just coming in halfway, I was obviously super aggressive, but this season the goal was just to see if I can get in the top 10. That win that was stripped away, that hurt from a points standing, but really I'm just aiming for that top 10.
All right, man. You got it tonight. You definitely kept yourself in a position, even after a scary incident at the 1/3 point of the race tonight, to get yourself that top 3 finishes. What do you got for sponsors, shout outs, and thank yous for us?
Well, first and foremost, I have to say hi to my daughter Alexis and her family. They gather around the TV, and I know she's got a lot going on with the little ones, but they always watch, so I always like to say hi to them and appreciate their support. Obviously, RTG, Tally Challenge. Josh is just an outstanding admin. Wiley is an excellent admin as well. They do such a good job controlling chaos on Thursday. So give them a shout out. And I'd also like to give a shout out to Zach Freemow, who won the race on Monday. So congratulations to you, sir.
Thanks, Tim. I really appreciate that. But I'm not trying to outshine your accomplishments here tonight. We know you're a great super speedway racer, and we know with the right luck, you'll be right up there in contention for that championship at the end of the season. So it's always great to talk to you. Thanks, Tim.
I sure hope so. Thank you.
I think we can now go down and get our second place finisher here, Donnie Garrett. Hey, Donnie, it's Zach and Seth up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
I got you guys. What's going on?
Man, leading this race on the final lap, but I got to ask you here, just from a racer standpoint, you had them all lined up single file behind you. Is it easier to be able to defend a line and defend the run on the final lap if you've got them stacked up double wide and triple wide instead of having them single file because you don't know where the run's coming from?
Yeah, it got pretty wild there at the end. I was watching Joe more than I was watching anything because I didn't really was really paying attention to nobody else. Uh, I thought he was going to push me. Then when he made that move to the outside of me, I was like, oh, I didn't think he was going to do that. So then I had to block it, and then I came back up, and I was like, he's going to hook me. So I got back out of his way, and then of course we got down in there into the turn 3, and then I guess all those guys got together or something and wrecked. But heck of a finish, man. Like I said, top fives, top tens. That's what I need to get into this chase. That's the only thing I'm worried about. I just want clean races, top fives, top tens. I was right where I needed to be, and had the opportunity take a shot there at the win. I took it, and Joe was pushing me pretty hard and kept turning me sideways. I really didn't want to push. I didn't want to pass Richard. I was going to push him to the win actually, and the pushes were just getting so hard that I just had to go. And then, of course, when I jumped under Richard, he come down just late on me. I don't know why he did that, but anyway, great night and second place, man. I'll take that all day long. And this old Clips car, buddy, I tell you what, better watch us in the playoffs.
You know, one thing that we ended up talking about was the fact that you guys had that off week last week, and we were thinking, with having that one off week, you guys coming in here, you're anxious to race, you got those early jitters, and we saw you guys taking it double wide and 3 wide in the first 10 laps of the race. Things settled out a little bit after that, but I mean, what was the case there? Was it the case of you guys trying to see, hey, do we still have the capability? We got to get ourselves back into the mindset of how we can race 3 wide with each other, or was it just the fact that now you guys realize you're heading down the second half of the regular season and the stress is coming in on having to point your way in or win your way in, whichever the case may be, in your points positioning?
Time's running out on these guys. There's a lot of guys, time's running out for them. They're in position where they're 11th, 12th, 13th in the points, and they got to take chances. I was there last year. I was 14th, 15th in points, come up to about 10th or 11th, 12th. And, when you're in that position, you're throwing caution to the wind. You got to go. And the guys in front, we're trying to protect. We're top 10. We're trying to protect that top 10. And then the guys way back there, they're like a dart without feathers. I mean, they're coming to the front any way they can get there. And so you got 3 races going on basically. And it's guys are going all over the place, man. That one time when we had that big mix up where we had that caution, you had a lot of the guys that typically at the front, and everybody else was mixed through the pack, man. And I looked up through there one time. I think it was 6, 7 rows that were running in front of me. And I'm like, man, this is going to get crazy. So I got to the bottom. I said, well, if a wreck happens, I can get the heck out of it. But yeah, it just a great race, and glad to bring a second place home. I'd love to got that win. God, it's been so long. I've almost forgot what it's like, but it's coming. I'm telling you, it's coming.
Hey, Donnie, it's Zach in the booth. Hey, man, I just want to piggyback off something that you just touched on when you were speaking there a moment ago. You mentioned how you were in completely different territory this season than what you were at this point last season, where you were really struggling, fighting as hard as you could, to try to get yourself into contention for the playoffs. Now, if you look at the points standing this season, you're solidly 5th. You're looking like you're in good position as long as you can just pull out a couple more good finishes here. How much does that change the way that you approach each race as compared to where you were last season, where you knew you had to go out there and absolutely maximize your points. How does being able to relax a little bit and breathe a little bit more on race day, play out in comparison to that high pressure sort of scenario that you were faced with last season?
Sure. So right there at the end, I mean, with 3 or 4 or 5 to go, even I looked up and I said, okay, there's nine cars in this pack. Ninth place ain't that bad. Ninth place would be good for me. So that was my mentality. I was like, hey, top 5s, top 10s, and so when Joe, when I went down, Joe went up on the high side and I come up and blocked him. If I was 15th in points, I wouldn't have moved. I'd have stayed there and let him wreck me. I mean, you had to. But I'm like, no, get out of his way because he's going to run over me if I don't. And so you're not taking the chances. So I kind of succeeded there and let him go because I knew I'd end up somewhere in that top 9. That was fine with me. Last season, I would have been doing anything I could to stay up there because 9 points back, that 9 points drop, that's going to kill me in the points. Whereas, right now I just need to maintain. And so my mentality, of course, is different. I want to win, absolutely, but winning ain't everything. It's getting into this playoff right now. And then we'll worry about the wins. But right now it's just trying to stay safe, trying to stay out of trouble, don't cause anything, and stay in this top 10 so we can get to these playoffs.
Okay, so great finish tonight, as you have managed to do throughout multiple races of the regular season so far this season. You're comfortable in points. Now, I don't want to bring up the heartbreak of finishing second place yet again, but in the multiple interviews that we've had with you, we've heard you talk about how much more advantageous it is to have teammates out there to work with you, kind of like we see Bernie and Joe work together, kind of like they did tonight. Now, is there anything that you think that you can do, or any alliances you think that you may be able to form as you inch closer to the playoffs, knowing that you don't have one of those teammates to work with? Do you think there's any alliances that could potentially be made out on the track in lieu of that?
Not really. I mean, it's every man for himself out here, but except for those couple of guys that race, and then you got some other people that they tend to work together when they can. But no, I just don't have nobody. And there was a time that I won a lot of races, and when I did, then everybody wants to beat you. It's kind of like with Joe and him now. Everybody wants to beat them, but they've got each other. So they don't. Beating me is doing something. That's what people would tell you. I'm not that guy anymore. I mean, I'm kind of a top 8 to 10 guy anymore now. But there was a time where I was winning a lot of races, and you make a lot of people against you when you do that. And so for me, I don't really have any teammates. I work a lot with Chuck. Me and Chuck tend to work together a lot, but Tim, I like to work with Tim. I mean, there's several guys I like to work with. Josh is a great guy to work with, but we have the understanding, hey, 1, 2 to go. We're on our own. I'm going to take a shot to win if I can get it, and you have to respect that and understand that. And that's what, like I say, with Bob. I think something happened with Bob tonight that threw one of their guys out. So I know Joe was trying to rely on me to kind of help him there. And like I said, I wasn't thinking he was going to make that move, but he did. But again, it's racing. That's his job. He's supposed to do that. So, but hey, like I say, second place, man, I'll take it.
Absolutely. Another solid showing. It's going to help you in the points as we get 1 week closer to the playoffs. So thank you. Shout outs. What do you got for us tonight here, Donnie?
I want to talk about the Fantasizer, man. We haven't talked about that yet. The fantasy league that I created, drivers picking drivers, and I think it's cool. Everybody seems to really like it. You're picking your peers, and it's really cool to go back and pull up the teams and see who people picked, and people seem to be really enjoying it. And so yeah, I want to give a shout out to that. And I think Brittany, which is either Grant's wife or girlfriend, she was been leading for a long time, and like I say, she's not even a driver. So what's that tell you?
Well, Donnie, congratulations. The consistency continues for that 77 team. Second place here tonight. Congratulations on that, and we look forward to seeing you continue this consistency down the home stretch.
Woo! You got it, buddy.
Donnie Garrett led 16 laps here tonight, which tied him for most laps led this evening with the driver that we're going to be talking with now. Down to victory lane we go to talk with Jeremy Jeffries. Hey, Jeremy, it's Seth and Zach up here in the FRM booth. You got us?
I do. Hey, how you guys doing?
Well, man, we talked to you in victory lane last season, but down the home stretch, you weren't able to get yourself up there into the top 20 in points for that win to count towards a playoff spot. Different story here in season 52. You were in the top 10 coming tonight's race. You put that number 8 in victory lane. You're battling for a championship. So now, what about these final 3 races? What's the mentality?
Oh, the mentality is I'm stress-free now. This is great. I I just got to go out there and try to get points now. I don't have to worry about really. I don't have to worry about where I finish now. I just got to try to do what I can to get the most points going into the chase.
You know, after that pit stop was finished, that final round of green flag pit stops, only 9 of you up there in that lead pack. And Zach and I, we were trying to figure out where is that run going to start? When is it going to generate? And that 3-wide move on the back straightaway, you had the drafting help as well to get to the front of the field. I mean, was there communication going on there? Was it just a case of if someone stepped out that, somebody was going to go with them? Did you have something coordinated there, or was it someone just willing to work with somebody else to try and pick up more spots?
Well, going back to that pit stop, I was actually a little short on fuel, so I was just sitting there riding, trying to save some fuel, make sure I had enough to make it to the end, and just watching the mirror, waiting to see where the runs were coming from. And I know Chuck poked his nose out there a couple times. I was like, I can't go yet. I can't go yet. I don't know if I have enough fuel. So then I finally, when I felt comfortable with enough fuel, I saw somebody going, and I made a move. We had no communication at all. It just so happened that I saw it coming, got that bump, and just ended up in the right place at the right time.
So Jeremy, something interesting that you just mentioned. You mentioned, "Hey, I don't know if I've got enough fuel." How exactly close were you on fuel? Because we saw all the leaders come down together, get that bit of gas to get them to the end of the race, but we all just kind of assumed that would be more than enough to get to the end. How close was it on gas?
I ran out when I was trying to do my burnouts.
Okay, so now we know you're secure in the playoffs. You've got that victory. You're only 16 points behind Grant Wesley, who's in the points lead at this point. Moving forward, do you have any drivers that you try to help out? You know that you're good, and all that you have to do is get some decent finishes. So that takes the pressure off you, like you mentioned. Is there anybody that you look to work with and try to get them in the playoffs to help you out as that goes along as well?
I think the key is to see who's willing to work with me and who I can work with, and try to put that in the memory bank for the chase, and hope that those alliances develop and work for me later on down the road.
Well, if it's any consolation, we just talked to the 77 Donnie Garrett. He said the exact same thing as what you just did. So maybe the two of you need to hook up, make a little bit of a phone call and say, "Hey guys, we need some help." But as always, congratulations on the win, Jeremy. Great to talk to you. Sponsors, shout outs, thank yous. What do you got for us?
I guess I need to get Donnie's number. Can somebody throw that to me? No. Thanks to the FRN. Thanks. This broadcast is going to be fun to watch. I had so much fun in the race, just watching what happened and making moves. And I had to go to the back once there for a penalty, and I just got to race my way back up to the front. And I just can't wait to watch it back and hear your guys' commentary. Always thanks RTG, the owners, admins. Fantastic place to race. Thanks to Dave Melson. I know he's not going to be very thankful but in that big wreck on the backstretch on lap 34, he gave me a bump that was just enough to send me through the middle of that wreck, and he ended up getting collected in it behind me. So thanks to Dave. And my brother was in this race tonight, so it was good to see him there. I told him he's my good luck charm, the 41 of Andrew All. So told him he needs to race more. And yeah, that's it.
Jeremy Jeffrey survives the chaos of Talladega here tonight. He gets his first win of the season. We now go 6 for 6 in different winners that have now put themselves into the forefront to battle in this season's playoffs. Congratulations there, Jeremy. We look forward to seeing what you do here for the remainder of the season before you get yourself geared up to race for a championship.
Thanks, guys.
And so now, as we have officially entered into the second half of the regular season, heading down the home stretch towards the playoffs, one thing that I love that we heard from Donnie Garrett here, Zach, and we hear this from the naysayers in NASCAR itself, we hear it in sim racing as well, that these guys are just out there going fast and turning left. But if you listen to what Donnie Garrett was saying, every lap, whatever position he's in, he's constantly thinking. He was doing math in his head in that group of 5 of, this is the furthest back I can finish. Okay, I'll take a 9th place position. I won't force the issue. The thought process, it's constantly happening every single lap, whether it's lap 1 or whether it's the final lap.
Absolutely. And I think we heard similar sentiments out of both Jeremy Jeffries and Tim Knopfler as well. There is so much more going on inside the cockpits of these race cars and inside these drivers' helmets as this race is progressing. It's more than just, trying to maintain a steady line and maximize your position on your racetrack. But as you mentioned, as we get closer and closer to the playoffs, especially for these drivers that don't have wins yet, like you said, like Donnie said, they are doing math in their head. They're keeping track of all these drivers that they know are around them in these top 10 in points that don't also already have victories. So there's a lot more to it. There's a lot of strategy that, some people watching, from an outside perspective may not realize. It's a lot more than just luck at these super speedways, even though luck plays a big part of it. A lot of thinking, a lot of wheeling and dealing, a lot of mathematicians out there behind the wheels of these race cars.
Now, for Donnie Garrett in the position he's in a pretty comfortable spot. He was top 5 in the points coming into this race, so he was able to kind of figure a little bit easier of, if I lose some spots, it's not going to affect me quite as much. If you look at some of those guys that are hovering around that top 10 position in the standings with 3 races left, how easy is it to be able to do math in your head when you're in that position?
Well, it's a little bit more difficult because there's a lot more points gaps that you have to take into consideration. However, if you are the 77 of Donnie Garrett, you also cannot get too complacent, which is also the case for the 088 of Tim Knopfler. Donnie Garrett, he's got about a 1 race pad. If something were to happen with the size of the fields that we have had on a regular basis so far this season, if he were to lose 30 points, that would put him to minus 49, which at this point is outside of that top 10. So without a victory, that takes you out of playoff contention. So that's as fast as it can happen, Seth. And these big swings that we talked about earlier on in the broadcast where, if you are in a bad spot, had Bob Seminara not secured that victory, he might be sitting in 6th place in points right now worrying, oh man, if I have another bad wreck or another bad race, I'm outside that top 10 without that security of a victory. So that's going to put me in a little bit of panic mode as well.
I'm not sure how he would feel about me describing him as such, but I want to highlight Grant Wesley. He could kind of be the Joe DeSpirito of season 51. He's leading the points. He's been close numerous times this season, but he's still trying to find victory lane. Do we see this 88 in victory lane in these final 3 races, or does he have to wait till the playoffs like Joe did last year?
Well, we know that 88 of Wesley is more than capable of pulling off victories. And if you look at statistics right now, statistically speaking, even without a win, Grant Wesley is averaging 37.5 points per race. Now, you look at Joe DeSpirito, who is 2nd place in points right now, 6 points behind Wesley. He is only averaging 36.5 points. So Grant Wesley, with these consistent runs that he has had, and even tonight where we saw him involved in a big wreck and he was all torn up, still somehow managed to eke out that 9th place finish. That counts a lot heading into the playoffs. We know he can win races, be it in the regular season or the playoffs. I think it's more just a matter of time.
As we know, near the end of last year's regular season, it's the survivors that end up being the ones you have to watch out for once the playoffs begin. Grant Wesley's the only driver inside the top 4 that hasn't gotten a victory, but you just get the feeling it could be very, very soon. But we draw to a close on another race here at Talladega Superspeedway. 6th different driver to go to victory lane in the form of Jeremy Jeffries. There's so many comeback stories, it seems like, here this season. Chuck McClure didn't have a win last year, though he made the playoffs, and he won 2 weeks ago. We ended up having Jeremy Jeffries win here tonight, and he had won last season but didn't make it into the playoffs. You just kind of get the feeling there may be a couple more surprises when we get to the end of this regular season.
Absolutely. And if those surprises come from anywhere outside the top 10 in points, it could be a very real possibility, Seth, that we might see some sort of an underdog make their way into the playoffs last year. We saw Billy Elliser do it last season based on points. He was able to point his way in. He is already secured with a victory so far this season, sitting 12th in points unofficially. And there's a lot of other drivers, like we mentioned, between Knopfler and you look all the way down to, even throughout the top 30, Mark Paglia is still sitting 33rd in points. Now, you talked earlier, it would take a little bit more than just a win to get himself in, as we saw Tim Knopfler struggle to do last season. But some of the guys in front of him, very real possibility. So we could see a dark horse in the playoffs. You never know. It's going to be exciting to see in the last 3 weeks of the season.
Regular season was whittled down from 10 to 9 races, and as Donnie Garrett aptly put it, as we get closer and closer to the end of the regular season, the anticipation and the anxiousness starts to ramp up, and it's going to translate out there on the track. Another great one here tonight as Jeremy Jeffries continues to celebrate in victory lane. Zach, appreciate you joining the booth for this one. We got 3 more to go before we find out that playoff field.
Absolutely. And if these last 3 races are as exciting as what tonight's race were, man, I tell you what, I cannot wait to work our way toward the playoffs. Seth, as always, thank you. Flatout Racing Network, thank you. Owners, admins, race directors, drivers of RTG, thank you all as well. Great work as always. And of course, never forgotten about you at home in YouTube land watching this. We appreciate all of you tuning in. Can't wait to talk to you next week. Thank you, Seth.
We've gone 6 for 6 so far this season. Will we go 7 for 7? Tune in next Thursday night, green flag at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to find out. For one final time, for Zach Fremont, I'm Seth Cole. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday evening as you've been watching another broadcast courtesy of the Flatout Racing Network.
This broadcast is the copyrighted work of Flatout Racing Network and may not be rebroadcast, retranslated, or used in any form without the express written consent of Flatout Racing Network and iRacing.com Motorsports Simulations. Flatout Racing Network would like to thank you for your support, and we hope you enjoyed tonight's broadcast.